everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about B2B growth standard that is new out there, and I'll specifically go into PLS, product-led sales, and some of the common mistakes that we're not only doing it, but how we're connecting it to our overall growth engine. So we'll talk about how to unlock that magic. But a little bit about myself, this very whitewashed picture of me. I'm head of growth at Dropbox as of last week, although I've been an interim growth at Dropbox for the last 9 months, so it was very well de-risked decision. And I will be a solopreneur again. Once a solopreneur, always a solopreneur. So I'll still advising companies. I have my Reforge courses. I have my newsletter too as well. But my experience really comes from operating both in the full-time roles as well as interim in the companies like SurveyMonkey, Malwarebytes, Amplitude, Miro, Netlify, and now at Dropbox. And I've advised 50+ startups over the last 8 years or so. So my specialty is finding patterns. And I am so jealous of Emily Kramer's Krameworks, because now I want to have some sort of Verna works, but it doesn't work that well. Anyway, let's talk about growth. We're all talking about marketing. Sometimes marketing is confused with growth. It makes me ick. But what is growth? Well, first there's growth team, which is a weird combination of product and marketing in the same body that speaks data. Now, it's a merged function that is a result of a lot of product focusing really on value delivery, so value creation, and a lot of marketing that is focused on core messaging and core positioning, but who is actually responsible for distribution? And this is where growth marketing emerged. This is where growth product emerged as a specialization of who creates value versus who distributes value. And in fact, it actually takes a much bigger role in the PLG company, because in PLG company, there's no sales team that is responsible for that distribution. So growth team acts as a sales team inside a PLG company. You have your product team that is creating value, and growth team is accountable for all of the distribution and holds the revenue targets against it. So growth takes a more of a bigger role in PLG companies, but growth does exist in other growth models as well. But let's talk about the model. Model is very different from actual PMF. You can have product market fit, which is very easy to construct as a framework. You need to understand there's a problem in the market, and you need to come up with a solution to solve it. You found the product market fit. Awesome. But there are millions of companies that could find product market fit that will never be able to build successful businesses out of it. In fact, there's lots of tools out there that can probably solve our problems a hell of a lot better than what we're using today, but we're not using them because other companies have built a distribution system, which is a growth model that is so much stronger that almost monopolizes the space, and we're stuck using their subpar solutions because of their distribution model. So if you want to build a great product, that's great. Great products do not build great companies. Great companies are created at good enough products, unfortunately, with incredible distribution systems. In fact, there's a lot of really shitty products out there that have such amazing growth models that they win. And it's impossible to disrupt them. I'm sure you're using many of them for your recruiting needs or CRM needs that you wish you never had to log in a day in your life. But there's also a right way to grow. Not all growth models are equal. The right way to grow is loops. Well, there's Fruit Loops. We're not talking about those. There's while loops. We're not a developer here. But what I'm talking about is growth loops. Growth loop is a very simple concept. This has been popularized by Reforge, and I really abide by this framework, and I instill it into every single company that I touch. Growth loop is a very simple concept of a flywheel, where you have a new user or an input that takes an action of a step that outputs another input. Let me give you 2 really powerful growth loops that have powered companies for years with a 0 marketing spend. First example is SurveyMonkey. I was at SurveyMonkey for over 8 years, and it was an incredible example where this loop, where user comes in, they create a survey, they send a survey, I send it to all of you, you respond, and a portion of you, only 2%, but portion of you come in and create your own surveys. This loop has taken the business to over $200 million in revenue, over 15 years, bootstrapped with zero paid marketing investment. In fact, zero marketing or zero sales altogether, just on this loop alone. Now, it had limitations, and at one point we reached such a huge saturation in the market. I think we conducted a study when I was running analytics there where 1 in 10 people in US that is internet user has taken a SurveyMonkey survey, so we kind of flooded the market with it. So there was limited ability to continue growing, but this was an incredible loop that just kept on giving. At Dropbox right now, we have a really still 17 years later, this growth loop that keeps on giving. We have over 1 million signups every single week. Half of them come from this loop. Zero spend, zero marketing dollars. Product is fully responsible for this as an acquisition channel. The loop is simple. New user creates content. They want to share it. Some of the sharing recipients come in through email or through link or through folder, whatever it is. They click through and they create Dropbox account. 2 million signups a month, 17 years later, still come through this loop. So think about any time that you're going to create this distribution model is, yeah, there's going to be fuels, like Emily said, but this is the engine. This is the engine that will keep on spinning and it will continue feeding your growth model. Now, the way that you organize your loops is you create acquisition loops, which will help you understand how to sustainably acquire. You also create monetization loops in order for that money to continue giving you returns, and you also create retention loops that are either organic or manufactured in the nature. But the goal is always to build a predictable, sustainable, and competitively defensible growth model. This is the motto for any growth team, for any growth marketing team, for any growth product team. But where do you build it? This is a 3x3 metric of your menu of choices of where you can build this growth model. You need to answer questions of acquisition, monetization, and retention. And you can do it with product-led approach, marketing-led approach, or sales-led approach. All of these are options. And you need to pick whichever is the option is the best for your business. So what is the acquisition when it comes to product-led? Well, users acquire other users through referrals, virality, collaboration, whatever it is. What is marketing on acquisition? Well, it's a lead gen on other third-party platforms. I do SEM, I do SEO, I do social, I do co-marketing. What is sales? Well, you hire a salesperson and they go find you a customer through outbound. So all of these have their own tactics, and all of these will have loops within them. I honestly expected more of this reaction when I presented 3x3, but I'll deal with my emotions later. But PLG has been all of the rage lately. Almost overhyped, honestly. And let me tell you why. Well, first of all, we have issues with cost of acquisition. Let's face it, Google raises their rates on all of their search terms at 20% plus every single year, sometimes every single quarter. That's why they're the most powerful company in the stock market. And finance keeps choking marketing to say, why can't you give me better return? Well, if your prices are constantly going up, you need such drastic improvements in the bottom of the funnel, you just can't keep this as a sustainable source and scale it indefinitely anymore. Tracking. Oh my gosh, we're like, a prospect, is this a lead? A blog subscriber, is this a lead? We're so desperate to just get any intent through. And we have a really big gap now between, the traditional awareness, consideration, intent, and we get somebody at the awareness and we yank them to intent without anything in the middle. PLG solves for that actually pretty nicely, so this is a good one. Saturation of messaging. This one hits hard as a marketing, but everybody's saying the same thing. They're all the leaders. They're all trusted by somebody who matters. They're also most popular. They're rated #1. There's the quadrant that they're in. They're loved by customers. 95% of the Fortune 1000 uses because legal doesn't tell us we can't use 100%, and they're all free. We're all saying the same thing. It's hard for a customer to actually see the difference. Yes, there's viral and branding campaigns that you can do, but they're far and few in between. It's not a sustainable way to grow. The next one is really interesting, and this really happened over the last 15 years as a shift in our field, which is user became a buyer in B2B. This is amazing because developer now can buy or sell and start the project on its own. You can have a product manager buying Miro for their team. You can have marketer buying Asana. There's so many ways that all of a sudden we don't need to involve CISO. We don't need to involve CTO up until a certain point, obviously. But initial traction can be done by an end user that can start making some of these decisions. Now let's talk about blurring roles. I know we talk about product, marketing, growth, but let's face it, our roles are not as specialized as they were 15, 20 years ago. Every single product manager is supposed to do their own data analysis. So is every single marketer. Every single marketer is doing some of their own creative in Figma or Canva. So we have this blurring of the roles. So now we can have a product manager that actually can be responsible for distribution, or we can have a marketer that can start building some things in the site or in product with no-code solutions. And we should take advantage of that as opposed to siloing ourselves in these departments. And lastly, data availability. We live in the world of data. Think about Amplitude. You can drop tags on your site or in your in-app experience, and all of the metrics about every single drop-off in your user experience are at your fingertips. No data analyst needed. We can do something with that data availability. We can build predictable growth model based on our existing product usage because we have so much visibility into it, which our parents probably only could dream of. But PLG is taken out of the context because everybody starts as PLG will solve all of my problems. It will reduce cost of my pipeline. It will boost my revenue. It will make me more profitable. All of those are false statements about PLG, which then leads to a majority of the population, after they try it and they see that it fails, go PLG is a waste of time. Never doing PLG again, sales all the way. And then you actually get to a point where you say, hey, PLG can actually solve some of my problems in certain segments, but it's not the only solution that I should be using. Now remember this 3x3? In order to scale a company to a final successful stage before you need to introduce the next horizon and product is to be in every single one of these 9 squares. That's the sustainable strategy, not to add PLG, is to be across this entire board. So your growth model should evolve, not start everywhere, but evolve to include every single one of those squares, or you will be disrupted by somebody who will. Because if you leave one of these squares open, you're leaving opportunity for a competitor to enter and to eat your pie. And then they can expand too, and now compete against you, against what was your superpower. So then let that be. Again, start with one row somewhere, but you do need to expand across all. PLG can actually be both offensive or defensive growth move. So Salesforce, introducing free trials. I don't know if anybody's doing it, but they do have it, and it's a defensive move for their SMB customers in lower mid-market to warn off the competition. They're not going to win with PLG, but they are doing free trials and self-serve payments and as part of all of our self-serve experience to try to push the bottom of the market away from coming up. That's the part of the distribution strategy, and it's an amazing tactic, even if their experience sucks. But offensive play. There's also a lot of new companies, new kids on the block that are using PLG as a way to enter into the sales-led or heavily marketing-led companies. Examples are Figma, Slack, Miro, Dropbox, honestly, the poster child of PLG that entered the market. But they actually use it as their competitive advantage against the players that are only doing top-down sales-led. And they're leaving all of the end-user goodness and user unsatisfied goodness unaddressed, that PLG can come in and scoop it up. So you don't have to do offensive every time. If you're a sales-led company, honestly, don't do offensive PLG. Just do defensive and maybe see if you can transition it out. Because PLG is only one tool in growth arsenal that can work well for some outcomes, but definitely not all. In fact, product-led motion, as I define it, is where product activates, engages, and retains users, and connects them to monetization without any human touch. So it's all self-serve. What's missing here? Acquisition. For B2B, to do PLG acquisition is actually really hard. There's not much word of mouth. It's not like people are going to go, oh my gosh, I just did this procurement process, and it was so amazing. Let me talk about it. They're also not going to invite my friend. Ooh, I can give $20 for a referral. Here, my coworker, please use this procurement tool. Nobody's going to do that. Those are for consumer tactics. But there are some collaboration acquisition tactics, such as, hey, I'm Slack, I started, I need you to come in with me so we can chat. So now I acquire you on behalf of Slack. There's casual contact loops like SurveyMonkey, where you just took my survey and now you will go sign up. So I, as a creator of the survey, exposed you to the tool. So they still use that user-generated acquisition loops. But those are not mandatory. There's a lot of really great companies that still do PLG, but they use marketing for acquisition, and that's perfectly fine. With PLG, there is no Band-Aid. Sorry for the picture. This is a screenshot of my Reforge course. But the user has to be able to understand the product entirely on their own. There's no Band-Aids. There's no human that you can insert into the problem and say, gloss over these mistakes. You have to only focus on straightforward problems that product is able to solve entirely on its own. So as a result, the use cases for what is being done on PLG versus what you actually resolve with sales-led increase in complexity. So if you do have sales-led company and you want to introduce PLG, it's not about making that sales-led product self-serve. It's about understanding how you can break down that very high complexity use case that your sales team needs to explain and onboard and sell to a smaller jobs to be done that can be started with just an end user doing something much smaller, and how you can build the escalator all the way up. So again, product-led experiences for PLG needs to be frequent and straightforward problems. But that doesn't mean your entire product has to be frequent and straightforward. This can just be a step in the right direction. There's obviously lots of benefits in product-led growth. Your product can scale infinitely, immediately. Push a feature, off you launch, and all of a sudden everybody experiences. Something that sales obviously cannot do. Also, changes can be shipped to optimize overall experience regardless of scale. Push a button. However, trade-off is a really high upfront cost needed to build and launch new product experience. My team at Dropbox in growth, so I'm responsible for self-serve revenue at Dropbox, is cross-functionally 300 people in growth only. Now, we have over $2 billion in targets, but we have to build a lot. So it's a really big investment for the company to be self-serve. It's not a cost reduction tactic. Product and engineering resources that you need to push towards the problem are enormous, which product does not usually like to own any revenue outcomes. There's a lot of product leaders out there that have very allergic reaction to any revenue accountability because that's marketing and sales job, right? But if you're gonna do PLG, CEOs have to push that ARR revenue goals onto product until it either has to say, yes, we'll take it on, or they create a growth team that subsidizes core product if the core product is a lot more technical and they're not able to make that evolution for the company. But this is honestly a lot of times resolved through growth. Sales-led motion, I don't need to tell you about it. You hire salespeople, they sell. But they establish a trusted confidence in very complex buying situations, something PLG cannot do. They customize buying experience. Again, something PLG, in theory, could do through personalization. Nobody really does it very well. And make it easier for multiple stakeholders to coordinate, because let's face it, nobody to buy $100,000, let's just say even probably $50,000 decision at any of your company for a software, you're not making that decision alone. You're not making that decision alone. There is a buying committee. because everybody and their mother wants to have an opinion and wants to have their voice heard. So they come in and sales helps to shepherd them because it's like herding cats. Everybody runs in the different directions, have their own different requirements, and have their own different point of views of what they want to use. Sales are fantastic in coordinating between those stakeholders. So companies honestly get oftentimes stuck between the false choice between PLG and SLG. But it rarely makes sense for a scaled company to be purely one or the other. I would argue Dropbox has stayed too long in the pure PLG motion, versus some other companies stay too long in the pure SLG motion. You need to diversify your portfolio away from a single point of failure, relying on only one growth framework. So companies need to be somewhere in between and really do it all. Let's talk about Amplitude. Amplitude was a fascinating example. I stayed with them for a year, and I helped them go from purely sales-led to help them start making their first steps into introduction of product-led growth. I'll give you a little story about them because I didn't know about it when I joined, so it was really interesting. When they actually started the company, they started as a product-led company, self-serve everything. They went to market. And what they found was very fascinating. Their target audience was actually SMB and mid-market. Perfect for PLG. But they got a lot of resistance from those companies purchasing Amplitude. Why? Because all of those companies obviously hope to be enterprises one day. And they never wanted to make another decision on their analytics provider, on their analytics software. So what did they do? They looked to those enterprises and said, what are they using? I'm going to buy that, because I never want to have switching costs, because this something that I'm buying is not scaling, because I know how expensive is it to implement and actually get all of the people to use. And what was enterprises using at that point? Omniture. So everybody was buying Omniture, even though Amplitude provided much, much better solution, much better product. Again, product was superior to Amplitude, sorry, to Omniture. But everybody was buying Omniture because they had such a great hold on the market. So what did Amplitude do? They actually shut down their PLG. They did leave freemium behind. And then they pivoted completely to be top-down sales. So they left some freemium. No self-serve monetization anymore. No even focus a lot on freemium. It was just kind of like democratize analytics for startups and SMB. If you come in, that's great. But our focus is going to be top-down. And they focused on that top-down until they went public, and then even a couple of years after going public. And they took us to hundreds of millions in revenue. And they beat Omniture. I mean, if you are presented within the choice of Amplitude or Omniture, I hope that you'll say Amplitude, maybe Mixpanel, but Omniture is not in the equation anymore, because they did have better products and they were able to win, but they competed head-to-head against that model because they could not win it from the bottoms up, given the cost of an implementation and decision-making committee who's making it. But that was not enough. They also then opened up an opportunity for Mixpanel to start eating them from the bottom. So what did they do? They started layering PLG on it. So they already had freemium. We had to create predictable motion to actually acquire. We created growth marketing team. And then we started creating self-serve monetization model, which was a huge headache because sales thought that we're competing against them and we're eating their quota, and all of their problems is because the self-serve $1,000 plan exists. But at the end of the day, through multiple iterations, we did get to the point after I obviously already left, so team has done a fantastic job of actually landing it, of having a self-serve motion that directly now competes against Mixpanel and pushes them out. So they started layering down. But that's only one story from going from sales-led to product-led. And Miro was completely opposite story. They started as a product-led company. Everything only self-serve. No sales team, fairly small marketing team. And then they started seeing hand raisers. People coming up and saying, listen, all of my team is using it. I want to buy it for more. I need a PO. I need privacy review. I need security review. So can you send me an invoice? Can you help me with my procurement process? So they started seeing those hand raisers. They started hiring sales team to suffice those hand raisers. They were just coming in through at the beginning through support, queue, and then they started layering in all of the sales motion on top of it in humans until they were able to have, I believe over half of their revenue at this point comes through sales, even though at the beginning it was like a negligent amount. And they drove that on top of PLG. So whatever usage was bubbling up, they would drive it to sales. Now, the PLG monetization escalator is actually fairly tricky. This is where most of the companies fail. Because even though you're acquiring for free, or let's just say a trial, it doesn't matter, you're acquiring an individual. But how do you go from this individual to selling to a company? That's a big gap. A lot of companies fall flat on this gap because that's something you cannot just bridge with a salesperson. You cannot hire a salesperson, have them go after end user, one individual, single end user, and all of a sudden have them buy a $100,000 plan. So you actually need to acquire an individual. Here's the tricky part. You need to activate a team in order to sell to a company. So all of your activation metrics need to be set on a team level if you want to sell in B2B, not an individual. That's a very, very important point. But even if we're going to sell to a company, if you're coming from a traditional sales-led enterprise company, the funnel looks pretty standard. You have an MQL, you have an SQL, and then it results in product usage where the value is realized. When it comes to layering sales next to product-led growth, the funnel is flipped. Realization of the value happens on top through product-led self-serve. And that gets scored through product qualification of the account, PQA, to become an MQL, to transition to an SQL and closed-won opportunity. This is a mind shift, and especially it impacts marketing. It's no longer about just creating pipeline, events, sponsorships, demand gen activities. Your self-serve users become your pool of prospects that you need to nurture to get to a certain level of product qualification to trigger an MQL. And this is also a lot of marketing teams fumble on because they continue trying to fit the traditional MQL, SQL enterprise funnel into product-led growth company, which fails miserably, and I have never seen any company succeed in this, even though I've seen many, many fail. Another way to think about it maybe is a bridge. If you have product-led monetization here, where demand gen is product usage and demand capture is self-serve monetization, on the other side of the bridge, you have demand gen that is happening by salespeople prospecting out, and demand capture happens by salespeople closing contracts. Product-led sales, to bridge those two, sits somewhere in the middle where demand gen is created still by usage, but capture is created by sales. So this is why you can't go from here all the way to there, because you're changing both variables, super risky, prone for failure. You can't go from here all the way here. Again, you're changing both demand and capture variables, super risky, high prone to failure. Doing it through the bridge and changing only one of the variables helps you start layering those motions on top of each other. And that is the key in order to create that sustainable, predictable growth. However, what ends up happening is B2B PLG company just starts hiring sales. They close out maybe one deal and they go, whew, if we can just have 100 more of those, our revenue will be up, up, and to the right. And they start hiring sales team without even understanding how to have an ability to scale their pipeline. We saw some presentations earlier today that said, hey, hand raisers are hand raisers. They're great, but they're not scalable. I have a wonderful story from Miro days because I joined them as an interim CMO. And Suzanne, if she's still here, she was my head of enterprise marketing. And we were only surfacing hand raisers. And our sales team was like, we need more leads. And we're like, let's create more hand raisers, more emails for everybody. So we basically just started emailing people trying to get them to hand raise, which resulted in a 0 incremental hand raisers and 10x increase in our email send volume. Well, never doing that again. Learned my lesson the hard way. We really needed to figure out how to actually find who looks like a hand raiser, smells like a hand raiser, acts like a hand raiser, but is not hand raising, and have our salespeople go after that. That was a much more scalable way to do it as opposed to trying to email everybody and their mother. So sales prematurely hiring PLG companies has them all the time, and then there's rifts. It's very unfortunate. Don't do it. And when this happens, the #1 behavior that you see is this. You have a new user sign up that gets a sales email 10 minutes later saying, hello, are you ready to buy? What's your budget? Not the right persona, not the right time, no value realized. And what does new user do? Bounce. Because why would you stay with the product that is so eager to sell to you right away, especially if it was meant to be as a self-serve experience? So don't do that. Scale carefully, one variable at a time. 3 things that is very important to also understand as you're building that escalator of, hey, we acquire individuals, we activate a team in order to sell to a company, is addressing these 3 things on every single account level. In order to be successful in PLG, end user needs to have motivation. I want to solve this problem on my own. I'm accountable on solving this problem. I have power to solve this problem. Ability, I need to be able to do it. If I'm not able to do it, I need my development team to do it, or I need somebody else to do it. I don't really have an ability then to actually do it myself. That's a friction. Or do I have a permission? Now, at the end of the day, none of us in our companies truly have permission to introduce another software into our businesses, right? It has to go through a procurement process. But we all operate under the concept of permission. Sorry, forgiveness. Not permission, forgiveness. They'll forgive me because I'll show them how much better it is. So how did Miro get into all of these Fortune 1000 companies? Not because they had permission, because they were asking for forgiveness and they were able to show, not tell. But there's also limits to that. We had a story where one of the big enterprise companies, I'm not going to name any names, CTO found out that we had like hundreds of Miro accounts. He got pissed that it happened without his knowledge. So there's a way that you can wait too long before solving for permission issue, even if an account seems to be growing very healthy. But the piece that is important that I want just to say here is on each step of that escalator, acquire individual, activate a team, sell to a company, one of these always breaks. Either motivation, I want to solve my problem, not the company problem. Ability, now I need additional resources to actually do it, or permission. I don't have the right to do this at this large of a scale. And addressing it is where you start plugging in sales. This is where they can be so impactful. But this is what you tell them to do. You're solving motivation, or you're solving ability, or you're solving permission, so they can know actually what playbook to use. I have examples of how product-led and sales-led can actually interact in different steps of the funnel, so you don't have to resolve the entire acquisition, activation, engagement, monetization funnel in the same motion. For example, you can stay on individual and teams purely on product-led. That's what Notion does, but then they break in product-led sales for an enterprise segment specifically. Superhuman does it super interesting because they actually put in the sales-led interaction in activation flow. It's meant to change your habits, so they actually put an SDR as part of the activation flow for everybody, so they can do a walkthrough, and they've measured a very good improvement in retention by just attaching that one person to help explain how the product works. But it's mix and match. This is why it's local to you. You just need to make sure that you're using all of the options. So let's build products that sell themselves, which is the motto for PLG, but let's not limit ourselves to only product-led growth in order to build successful companies. Thank you, everybody.